Stay tuned in, and we'll put the number up for you, and you can call in and talk to us here. Because when we're at dinner, we'd kind of actually like to be able to, eat and have a decent meal and not be preached at. So the other events, you can visit the website for more information. But we'll go on and turn it over to Don, who's got something for us to talk about.
Today, I wanted to talk about the fact that we have this God thing that people believe in, and we have mankind, the human race, and everybody that's here on this planet. And the title of the show is God versus Mankind. So it turns out that a lot of religious believers believe that if you please God, that's a benefit to mankind. That's the two things are compatible with each other, and in many cases they are. So let me throw a little caveat here. First off, none of us believe that God exists. So this is really all about the belief in God and the effect of belief in God has on the world. And so we're trying to examine the behavior of believers here. So. But there are times here when pleasing God or the attempt to please God is at odds with benefiting mankind, and this is really the sort of topic of the show. Is that the two of those are not always in sync. They are in sync when we say we want to take care of the poor and downtrodden, we want to love thy neighbor or do unto others the golden rule, that sort of thing. That's fine, but very often they're not in sync, and you can start to see this in some of Jesus' words, or Jesus' alleged words, in Matthew 22:37, Jesus says, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy soul and with all thy mind," and then he later says, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." And he kind of poses these as his first and second commandments. And notice now, God is first, and this is like the way up high. God is first in the list, and He's most important. He's more important than man. So maybe God is better. Maybe it's better to please God than to help your fellow man. And well, how much more important is He? Well, if He's omniscient and omnipotent and He's all-powerful, then He's infinitely more important than man. So in effect, when you multiply the first one by the multiplier of His importance, right, which is infinite, the second one doesn't matter. So, and that's kind of where we're going here, is that God, for a lot of believers, I think God is more important than man, and if you can please God and man, gets trashed in the meantime, then so be it.
That same type of logic applies to valuing this life in general in comparison to living for an eternity afterwards.
Sure.
This life becomes devalued to the point where it's virtually nothing. And even Justice Scalia, when defending his position on the death penalty, says that for a Christian this life is pretty much meaningless. So the death penalty really isn't that big of a deal because they've got eternity to look forward to.
Yep.
So that kind of reevaluating of worth. And yet on
right, especially
still
if you
proclaim
say
that it's worth it.
That you're going to be in heaven an infinite amount of time. All right, the waiting factor that you would give that is infinite, right? Because no matter what pain and suffering you have here, an infinite amount of pleasure is worth that, right? And furthermore, if you have an infinite amount of torture or whatever in hell, you want to avoid that. So they got the carrot and the stick both working together, doing the same thing, and this is much the sort of thing we get callers all the time on Pascal's wager. You better believe because you're gonna get this big reward or whatever. And if I'm
right, I'm going to heaven, and you're going to hell, and if you're right, we're both going to rot in the ground. Well, yeah, and if the Muslims are right, or if the Hindus are right, or if the Buddhists are right, there's all kinds of problems with Pascal's wager. Not the least of which is that you're not the only one with an idea about what might happen after we die.
But this is the same sort of logic that if God is that important, you better pay attention to God. So this theme of God versus mankind also shows up in the Abraham story, where Abraham goes at God's beckoning, goes up to the mountain to sacrifice his son. This is Genesis 22. To sacrifice his son as a burnt offering for God, and he goes through all the motions to do that, and then finally at the end, God says, "Oh, nope, I changed my mind." Just before young Isaac was going to get killed, God says, "Now I know now I know that thou fearest God." Kind of tough to pronounce all that. Anyway, so what happens to Abraham? He gets rewarded. He gets a bunch of land and becomes a great patriarch of all three religions: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So he is revered for his love of God over his own child. So this is not only selling out mankind; it's selling out his own kin to believe in God. Now, I've heard Christians say back, "Oh, well, he didn't really kill his son," but we're not exalting this guy for deceiving God, right? We're exalting him for choosing God over his child. So that's
the whole point was to demonstrate that if God actually had wanted him to kill his kid, he would have done so. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but this isn't the only human sacrifice that's in the Bible that God actually accepts. Granted, this one didn't go through all the way, but there's another human sacrifice that was accepted by God as a deal to win a war.
Oh yeah. Jephthah.
Yep. Offered to sacrifice the first person that walked out of his house, which
happened to be his daughter. Oops.
And after letting her go visit with her friends for a while, he killed her, just like he'd promised God, and that made God happy.
Well, God was conspicuously silent in that story, right? But in this particular one, God, really, really wanted him to do this. Anyway, so we see this sort of calculus of gain, right, or this accounting thing going on. If you keep God happy, he'll benefit you. He won't smite you, or he'll give you some land, or he'll bless your wedding, or whatever. And with this infinite reward and punishment, God is pretty darn important, much more important than mankind. So there's an inherent conflict of interest here between man and God, pleasing man or doing the benefit for mankind, and that's the deal here. Notice that it doesn't matter whether God exists or not. If God doesn't exist, you're still selling out mankind for the belief in God or your conception of God or whatever. It also doesn't matter too much whether the person selling them out is a believer themselves, right? If you can, as a politician, convince people that you're pious or whatever and dupe people into voting for you, it's all the same thing. It doesn't matter whether the duper is a believer or not, right?
Right. What matters is the act.
It's the act.
What are you actually doing?
Right. So we do see that belief in God and that sort of thing is a negative thing. There was a study recently that I've brought up before from the Journal of Religion and Society. It has a long title, but the author is Gregory S. Paul, and he did a statistical comparison of various social ills in various countries and correlated that with religious belief. And it's not necessarily a cause and effect thing, but it's pretty clear to me that and what he found, just to back up a second, what he found is that, I'll quote here, "In general, higher rates of belief and of worship in a creator correlate with higher rates of homicide, juvenile and early adult mortality, STD infection rates, teen pregnancy, and abortion in the prosperous democracies." So religious belief correlated with these social ills, and I don't think you have to stretch your imagination too hard to see that one is causing the other, and we'll talk about a lot of that today. Another thing to point out is one of the ways I like to kind of bring this problem of mankind versus God to a point is I've coined this idea of a faith number. Okay, and I've brought it up before, and that is, how many people would you kill in order to please your God? That's your faith number. And Andrea Yates, her faith number is at least 5 because she killed her 5 kids, right? Abraham's faith number is at least 1. So what's your faith number, right? So that's really sort of puts it down, I think, in very graphic terms, lurid terms, if you will. So let's talk about what are some of the examples of God versus mankind. Well, holy wars is a perfect example, right? If you are amassing your troops under the banner of God to go kill the Muslims or go kill the Jews or whatever, then mankind is not benefiting here, right? And supposedly God is, right? Supposedly you're killing the infidels or whatever. And this is the history of our religions is just full of these things, where we have the Crusades, we have the pogroms, we have witch burnings, we have torture of heretics in the Middle Ages, persecution of minority religions, and all this is still going on. Maybe perhaps not as bad as it used to be. We don't, but there's even the war in Iraq. Some people seem to think that this is has something to do with the Holy War, that we're, or that sort of thing. I guess the thinking here is that people who don't share your beliefs or don't believe in the God that you do are less than human, or that they can be converted to that through torture or whatever. And the irony, I think, here is that in many cases, these religions that are beating up on each other all believe in the same God. They all believe in the God of Abraham, right?
But they don't think they believe in the same God.
They don't think they believe in the same God. So that's always amazing to me.
Those people have twisted the real God into some other image, and these people have twisted the real God into some other image. It's a mess.
Yes, it's a
mess. If
you
trace back from an outside observer, you trace back the history of religion, it's obvious that they all stem from exactly the same God. It's just that, the Jews don't believe a Messiah showed up. The Christians believe the Messiah did show up, and that was the end of it. And the Muslims believe that Jesus was just a prophet, and that Muhammad was a new prophet, and that was the end of it.
Right.
Everybody wants to draw the line of this is where the religion stops, and we believe everything before here.
Right. But even Islam, from what I understand, has removed the story about Abraham from the Quran. That they believe in Abraham and all the story, but they've cut out some of the bad parts, or the sort of questionable.
There's definitely some
parts.
differences, yeah. Mm-hmm. Where I don't. I guess there's a debate about who cut what and why, but there's definitely differences in the stories, which is where you get the accusations of you have perverted the story, and no, you've perverted the story. And you have
And you did a talk the last lecture about the history of the biblical canon, and how all the different influences came in, and how it was all oral tradition for a long time, and then finally became written, and then there was a big tug of war about whose version was right, and who was the most powerful guy got whatever they wanted in there. And
there's a lot, and that there's a lot more to all that than I could ever get to, and plus that only talking really about the New Testament canon anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just a huge story. You could do 30 lectures
on it. A lot of study on it. Yeah. Okay, so holy wars are an example of God versus mankind. Missionary work is another example, in my opinion. We have a situation where various groups will go and try to convert the unwashed masses out in Africa or South America or something. And as it turns out, the sad fact is that missionaries have either wittingly or unwittingly killed more people than they've converted. And this is because they bring with them diseases that the people there are not immune to. And this has happened over and over and over again, that basically the people get wiped out by flus or whatever, and whoever's left maybe gets converted, and it's a great victory for God, I guess, at that point. So that also happened during the conquest of the New World when the first explorers came. I guess a lot of people were killed by smallpox and all sorts of other diseases that were foreign. And the far reduced numbers were much easier to convert during the conquests.
You can imagine, though, if somebody actually figured all of that out, how useful of a tool that would be. You could walk into some backwater place that doesn't have vaccinations and hasn't been exposed to the types of diseases that you've been exposed to. Walk in and say, "God sent me here to tell you that you're about to be hit by a terrible plague." And then when they start dying, you can say, "Hey, I told you this was going to happen."
Right.
And the ones who live,
that's right.
God saved you. It's so brilliant. It's amazing. It hasn't been tried before.
Yep. Here's another example: lying for God. We've talked a little bit about forgers in early Christianity at your lecture. Eusebius. Is that right?
Don't get me on the pronunciations. Okay, I think that one's Eusebius.
Eusebius, okay. Advocated using fictions as medicine to help convert people and cure heretics. This is in 275 CE, according to your slides. We've got a quote from Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism. "What harm would it do if a man told a good, strong lie for the sake of the good and for the Christian church? A lie out of necessity, a useful lie, a helpful lie. Such lies would not be against God. He would accept them."
And this kind of plays on it. There is a philosophical position where, of course, it would be okay to tell a lie. You know, you're talking about like if you have family members hidden away in your house and somebody's coming to kill them, and the guy's knocking on the door and say, "Is he there?" and you say no, because you're protecting them. And that same kind of mentality is being twisted around to, well, now it's okay to lie for God too. But the thing is that you have to look at the consequences of the lie. On the one hand, the lie is protecting somebody, and on the other hand, it may be doing harm. It may be spreading mistruth and creating a religious mindset that puts somebody in a position where they're unequipped to deal with reality.
Yep. I may actually do a whole show on lying for God because it's a big topic. So, but I'm gonna drop it there. The pedophile scandal is another example of God versus mankind. The children do not benefit from being the subjects of pedophilia, but the church has not taken responsibility for it. To date, no charges have been filed against hierarchy members. Only the perps and the hierarchy is complicit in this. And Pope Ratzinger actually covered it up, and he recently pled diplomatic immunity recently so that he could avoid taking any responsibility for his part in the cover-up. So there's another example. We have lots of God versus mankind in public policy. We have the suppression of science all the way from the Middle Ages up until now. Now in the Middle Ages we had the whole Earth is the center of the universe thing. We've had a lot of suppression of medical and knowledge of our bodies and that sort of thing because they're afraid they're going to take a look at a soul or something, and so bodies were taboo. And when you died, you were supposed to die, and this whole idea of medicine is very much at odds with the church teaching, and that's a fine example. Today we have the intelligent design movement, which is really a gross distortion of what science is, being published as science and effectively sabotaging the education of children. We have cloning and stem cell bans, which are potentially also sabotaging benefits that would come from that. And there are ways around some of the ethical objections rather than just shutting them off. In religious control of reproduction, we have sabotaging of family planning leads to increased abortions and poverty rates, and that's also a part of this study. HIV policies increase death rates. These folks that are talking about condoms playing Russian roulette or whatever, those folks are being very irresponsible. Gay rights are being harmed by religions. We have corrupt government officials like Bush claiming that God told him to go to Iraq and Iran. That's a second-hand quote, but I believe he said it. We have dominionists like Tom DeLay, who's probably one of the most corrupt people in the United States. We have Katherine Harris, who helped the Republican Party in Florida recently come to a convention called Reclaiming America for Christ Conference, and she talked about how she said, "I can't imagine being a public servant in any other way. So many times that I just can't imagine standing without faith." So she's talking about how important her faith was, and here she is rigging elections. So let's put the number up. I got a little bit more, and then we'll take some calls.
Sure.
How about that?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear people talking. Like she was speaking about how she can't imagine somebody being a political person without faith. And the number of times I hear people talk about what you can't do without faith, you can't do this, you can't do that. And the thing is that I have a hard time with this. I have a hard time understanding, and maybe it's just because I've been able to, think about it and move past it, and some people don't want to. It seems so blatantly obvious that faith is an exceedingly poor way to make a decision about anything. you can profess all day how you have faith in this and that's enough, and that you are therefore correct and justified in your own mind. But you have to recognize that there are plenty of other people out there who have faith in ideas, a faith that is identical to your own as far as they're concerned, and their faith is in something which is directly contradicts what you believe.
Right.
And you can't possibly both be right. You can, of course, both be wrong. And that's why...
You know, the terrorists that flew the planes into the World Trade Center and Pentagon had a lot of faith.
Yeah.
You know, do we want to, promote that? Is that a good thing?
It seems to me that when it's so obvious that there are better ways to determine what you think and how you're going to react to reality around you, and how you're going to deal with life in general. Sound, rational decisions based on evidence. That doesn't mean you don't go with your gut on occasion. But one of the things that, and Tracy and I talked about this a few weeks back, is that it's all about building up, developing critical thinking skills, and building up a kind of automated thinking system, so that when you hear a new claim, you don't have to spend a great deal of time necessarily evaluating it. Otherwise, you'd be crippled. You'd be sitting around not able to do anything until you worked through every possibility and came up with a conclusion. See, it's about training yourself to think properly. Mm-hmm. And faith and religions which push this faith-based thinking, that your intellect is insufficient, logic and reason are an insufficient way to reach the truth, and you have to rely on faith. The religions that push that are training people to hold a mindset that doesn't allow them to deal with or handle reality. So when bad things happen, it's the devil attacking them or whatever. And they'll pray and fast and do whatever and ask God to do things and be convinced that he does, regardless of whether or not what they wanted actually happens. It's God's in this win-win situation in their mind. If it happens, God gave it to him, and if it didn't, well, that was God's will, and that's just fine, because I'm a slave of Christ. There was somebody on one of the fundamentalist sites the other day who posted that there's no greater freedom than being a slave for Christ, and my jaw just hit the floor. The Bible talks about becoming a fool for Christ.
That's creepy. Yeah.
You were mentioning Abraham, and this was a demonstration not that he loved or respected or worshipped, but that he feared God. All of these things, the fear of God, the slave for Christ, the fool for Christ, they're all forms of voluntary ignorance. They're a way of encapsulating and keeping the beliefs that you find most comfortable safe and secure from any critical or rational examination. And I know that that's obvious, to most of us. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly frustrating that it's not so obvious to everybody else.
A lot of folks, right?
And they're proud. They're proud of this voluntary ignorance, to stand up in front of large groups of people and say, "I don't see how you can be a politician without faith." And wow, I just shudder.
Me too. As far as I'm concerned, faith is just an aspect of gullibility, right? Yeah. It's believing things that for which there's no evidence, right? So how do you know you're not being duped, or how do you know you're not believing the wrong thing? Especially when you go back and look at how the Bible came to be, and all the different forces at work there, and all the people who were actually trying very hard to warp the Bible and the Scripture to their own ends, and how can you say, well, I believe this, right? And the whole thing's evolving, and arguments about which version is that, and so on. What do you base your faith on, right? Atheists base our understanding of the world on reason and facts and science and these sorts of things, and we think that this is a much better way to go.
Yeah, and we always get accused, or frequently I'm accused of, well, you have faith in things, and I'm like, no, I don't have faith in anything. Well, you have faith the sun's going to come up tomorrow. No, I have a reasonable expectation based on an entire lifetime of evidence and a perspective which is shared by everybody. Everybody has seen the sun come up on every morning of their life, mm-hmm. and they're all expecting it to do so. It's not faith.
Songs about it even.
It's a safe. It's not faith. It's the safe bet. It's the smart, rational, right. expectation. But you want to continue, or do you want to go
let's talk about the number, and then I'll continue a little bit. We're a live call-in show. Where this is March 26th on Sunday. We have reruns on Tuesday, so if you're watching on Tuesday, this ain't it. So the number's on your screen. We welcome people to call in and tell us, and we've got a couple callers already queued up. So, but let me finish up here real quick. Getting back to the people in public office, I mean, a lot of folks, there's actually a big trend right now in promoting Christianity to get yourself into public office. And certainly all the folks that I mentioned, Bush and DeLay and Catherine Harris and lots of others, run on this platform of reclaiming America for Christ or whatever. And these folks actually, when they enter the public office, they actually have to take an oath of office to defend the Constitution. And these people are coming in sort of with the mindset that God is primary, and whatever God says, I'm going to do. And then so they're effectively lying in their oath of office, as far as I'm concerned, when they come and say they're going to defend the Constitution and make the Constitution primary. So, and those two are at odds. I mean, mankind and God are two different things. So who's responsible for beliefs? Well, the believers are responsible for the beliefs. The believers are responsible for the harm done, and the harm done should somehow be paid for by the believers. I don't know exactly how that should be, but I think these folks are responsible for it. We can take, for example, the pedophile scandal, and how once juries could start to decide damages in particular cases for people who had been abused, that all of a sudden things got better. All of a sudden the church woke up after 40 years of scandal and said, "Oh, well, gee, maybe we better fix this problem." It didn't apparently occur to them ahead of time. So 12-member juries, I think, can do a lot better as far as benefiting mankind and dispensing justice than God and all His followers can. Churches that sabotage family planning should pay for the women who are stuck with the kids. They should pay for all the costs of raising the kid through college. People like me, whose lives are being shortened by having stem cell research done, taken away, I should be compensated for that. And if say that Christians are right and I'm going to be tortured for all eternity, then the cost of my living is actually very expensive, right? Because the alternative is a very negative thing. So anyway, I should be compensated, and so should everybody actually. So how do we administer this punishment? Well, maybe we can tax the churches or something, or look in the church records and see who donated to churches and make them pay more for the harm the churches are doing. God can certainly pay the bills, right? If He exists, He can fix all this, right? If all things are possible supposedly with God, so
yep.
why can't He fix this? So that's it for me. I've got a couple news items, but we can hit them later.
Oh yeah, and there's some points we can get back to in a minute, but we're going to go on
calls.
to Jason. How you doing?
Doing really well. You guys are doing a great job. I really appreciate it. In terms of the faith issue, it's pretty interesting. I think that when you put it in context, there's two different primary things at play. I think one of the first things is that people say they have faith, first and foremost, especially when it's Christians, because they understand that while there are numerous other types of religions out there and beliefs, they are adopting this one belief and have faith that in doing so it is right, without regard to studying or understanding or taking the time or caring to have the intellect necessary to evaluate and compare other religions to understand if there isn't some other belief that might actually fit their ideas of humanity and what life is all about.
Sure, you can actually measure harm. You can measure the harm done by certain public policies, right? So an example that we have now is, we've had an AIDS policy in Africa where we were giving condoms away and helping promote safe sex and that sort of thing, and that's been sabotaged recently, and that's strictly worse than the old policy, and it's actually harmful. You can measure this by increased infection rates and this sort of thing, and it's very obvious that this policy is a bad thing.
This is Jason from our email list, right?
Yes, it is.
So you're calling from California?
Yes, I am.
Wow, you're actually getting to hear us live for the first time ever.
That's correct.
Well, we're glad, we're happy for all of you and the information you provide us on the list and your communication. But because you're long distance, why don't you go ahead and say what you need to say, and we don't want to keep you hanging on.
Oh yeah, it's no problem. I've got anytime minutes on the weekend.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Great.
Actually, I was hoping to be put on hold so I could hear some more of the show, but
Well, we can't tie up all the lines.
I do have some other comments. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is the other issue where faith usually pops up in a conversation is when you get to that point of the discussion where it comes down to, well, how do you know that God doesn't exist, or how do you know that God does exist? And when you talk with a rational person, we both, as true true people who are capable of understanding, do make the proper comment, and that is that I do not know.
Right.
And really, when they say, well, I don't know either, and that's where I make my leap of faith.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Now let's go ahead and move on to those other group of Christians, the ones who say, I do not have any question in terms of God existing. I know for a fact that He does. Well, let me understand. If you know that for a fact that He does, then you have no faith. You aren't making a leap of faith.
Yeah.
That's
You are not a
interesting.
person of faith. If you know
You've
for
just-
certain
you've just shoved
that
the
you are
switch
not
in
a
one
person
direction,
of
huh?
faith.
Yep.
That's interesting.
That's yeah. We've discussed a lot of times how you can be, for instance, a Gnostic theist, a Gnostic atheist, an agnostic theist, and an agnostic atheist, because Gnosticism refers to what you know or profess to know, and theism refers to what you believe with regard to deities. I find, I would generally classify myself as an agnostic atheist. There's the distinction between weak atheism and strong atheism, and I
Right.
generally fall on the weaker side, but it depends on how you want to classify strong atheism. If strong atheism is a Gnostic atheism where you're claiming to know that no gods exist, well then yeah, I'm definitely opposed to that, because that to me is a logically untenable position. But if you're classifying strong atheism as more of a for each of the gods which has been presented to me and properly defined, they are logically inconsistent and therefore cannot exist, then yeah, I'm a strong atheist in that sense. Because if you're actually willing and able to define your God and put him within definitions, and you can show that God is logically inconsistent, then yeah, that's a valid argument for strong atheism. When you were talking about earlier how people are accepting based on faith without challenging it or seeking an intellectual reason for it, some of that I think comes from comfort. We don't like to give up beliefs which are comfortable, warm fuzzies, especially things which we have inherited in a sense, because most people come to their religious beliefs by accident of birth. You don't see two Baptists giving birth to a child who at the age of 10 says, "Hey, I'm a Muslim." It just doesn't happen. They're going to love Jesus just like mommy and daddy, and whether or not it stems from laziness or comfort or fear, which I think is a huge factor in this of, I've lived my entire life, and now if I actually go investigate this, I could find out that I'm wrong and that my beliefs aren't real.
If you doubt, you might lose your place in heaven.
Right. Your eternal soul is in jeopardy from the standpoint of the believer trying to research. And that was, that wasn't an easy hurdle to overcome. I mean, a lot of people have, well, not a lot of people, in discussions with family members and whatever, there's been an accusation that, oh, you just got hurt or you got mad at God. No, that's not what happened at all. If you don't think that during this 2.5, 3-year study, which continues on, after 2.5 years, it didn't just stop. If you don't think that as a believer, when I started having questions, that I didn't hit my knees and pray to God to give me some information and some, anything, give me any little thing, then you're just crazy, because nobody sacrifices these comfortable beliefs just on a whim.
You know what's interesting for me? I can remember when I was 5 years old, and having the discussion with somebody about, well, where does God come from? And they couldn't answer. And ever since then, I have been.
I had a similar thing growing up too.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was asking questions.
So I've grown up
they couldn't answer.
that way my entire life. Now, over the past 2 years, I have spent a considerable amount of time researching matters of faith and understanding different religions and everything else. And in fact, I think our schools ought to adopt a required comparative religions course so that it forces everyone to see all the different types of religions out there.
Yeah,
that would be great without forcing, proselytizing. Just saying, here's this religion, they believe this, this, and this, and move on to the next one.
Yep. I'd like to see it done as not just a factual step-by-step comparison of all religions, but a little bit from a historical perspective, because while it's good to teach diversity and open people's minds to other ideas, and I think those are essential, and I've often been in favor of a comparative religions type course. I also think that the history of the religions, even for people who don't like history, can be not only entertaining, but very educational, and getting the background behind the diversity. Yeah.
It's a big part of our culture, and it has a big impact on the world, and so you can't just examine it in a minute way, right? You have to take a look at the impact of it.
It is so huge of an issue. It really does need to become more pervasive and more thoroughly understood by all people, so that they can appreciate all the nuances and the dynamics. Now, during this 2-year soiree that I've had with looking at all this information, it is fascinating, because I finally got into all the Christian apologetics and everything else, and when I got down and really understood, you know what, these people will not ever believe anything, and they will make stuff up to make sure that they don't believe it. They'll change the speed of light. They'll change the fact that they believe this time in the New Testament, but now we want to talk about the Old Testament. Right. And then finally, they'll even change what the meaning of is.
That's right.
It's the most frustrating thing in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's scary, because these are the people that are preparing to take over our country, and I think it's imperative that we come up with a very strategic, well-thought-out plan to try to defend ourselves, because we're about ready to become second-class, well, we already are second-class citizens, but it's going to become very, very hateful by these people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I'm not so sure that I think it's as dire. I tended to be optimistic in that things will hopefully self-correct a little bit, that we would never get to the point where we would so blatantly
I think the pendulum is slowing down a little bit,
and,
and yes, things have looked very scary as of late. I agree, and I'm very concerned about it too. But I think that folks are waking up and realizing that maybe this is not the right path to go down.
Well, I definitely agree with him that we need to be taking action, and I think in part that's what we do on this show. That's what Jason's been doing in emails with us and obviously other things. And I think there is a lot more action being taken on the part of secular society, free thought, atheists, agnostics, anything that doesn't fit into the little, fundamentalist Christian theocracy.
Everything but. I think we all of us, all the non-theists, all have to group together to protect our rights, and I just hope that when it comes right down to it, that people will in fact step out and express their views that, you know what, this is America, this is what our country was founded on, and if you're going to try to take it away, you're going to have to leave. And and thank you guys for your show, because you are certainly contributing to the cause, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Jason. We appreciate your information as well. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. We're going to move on to some other callers. For anybody who doesn't get through or doesn't want to get through to actually speak live on the air, as a reminder, you can always email tv@atheist-community.org. And for any atheist or atheist-friendly people, like Jason, although unfortunately he's in California, we will be going to dinner after the program at Threadgills on Riverside. The show's off over at 6 o'clock. We get there between 6:30 and 6:45. Any atheist or atheist-friendly people are welcome to join us. So we want to keep taking calls?
Yeah, let's do. So other callers been on the air on the
is
line
it
for
Rhonda?
You remember me? I called in December. But anyway, I'm wondering how many people bothered to look at the Maryland column today in the parade. Somebody asked her about how many people are born and die in a single day. And
who is this?
I think she's talking about Marilyn Vosavant.
Vosavant? Okay.
She's supposed to be the highest IQ in the country.
Yeah.
But anyway, each day on Earth, about 350,000 people are born, and 150,000 die.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, how long can the Earth put up with that?
Right, and we don't even have the highest, rate of increase in the United States. We have a lot of immigration too, by the way, which also adds to the amount.
I suppose that the rulers and kings and whoever just want to be sure not to run out of men to fight the wars with.
I've heard that before, from other folks.
But they're born in the United States because the government pretends to believe that human life is sacred.
Well, and a lot of the economy is based on growth, as it turns out. That as more and more people are doing, there's more and more people working, more and more consumption, and Europe has actually struggled with their economy in declining populations, and it's not because of secularism so much; it's because of just the number of people there is it's not a growth thing anymore.
Yeah, and a lot of the people wish they hadn't have been born. Don't you think?
Maybe.
I would hope not. I would really hope that that type of, because that's the thing that comes up sometimes, not necessarily that you hadn't been born, but there's an accusation on occasion that atheism automatically leads to nihilism and depression and things of there's no point to life, etc. I would hope that nobody.
It's enough to be depressing.
It could be. That would be very depressing. But
I
would hope
let
that
you
people.
Go.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks for calling.
It's we're lots of population issues. Most of it's really outside the realm of what we would normally talk about, but there are definitely social issues that surround those population concerns and environmental concerns as well. Yeah,
well, I've heard a lot of humanists. Humanists are very big on population issues, and they'll tell you that the overpopulation is the sort of root cause of a lot of moral issues, and that you don't have enough resources. It's hard to educate all those people. Hard to find homes and that sort of thing and live a good life if you have too many people. And
of course, I guess it depends on who you listen to, because one of the fundies, and I can't remember his name or when this was said, and I don't know if he was talking about I think he said the entire population of the United States would fit like within the city of some city in Florida. if we're all just standing like this. So obviously we're not running out of room, and we're not overcrowded if we can cram all of the United States into that one little spot. But I think he might have overlooked a couple
this
numbers.
whole oil issue is gonna change the world very soon, in the next 20 years, 30 years.
We're going to run out of resources before we ever have to worry about running out of room. I mean, you can always build up.
I guess so.
We've proved that for years.
I guess so. Build a Tower of Babel or something.
Build a tower of terrorist temptation.
Okay.
We got Steve.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Hi. This guy in Afghanistan who decided somewhere along the line to convert to Christianity,
right,
and is now
he's getting a lot of attention.
Right. I would say that's a small individual example of your topic, but something that struck me about that was the reaction of our side, basically saying, using the words, you have to allow for religious freedom, wanting to protect this guy. And here's my question is, would we have reacted that way? And I'm talking about Condoleezza Rice and just the whole response from our side. Would we have responded that way if it was somebody who had converted to Hinduism,
right,
and was going to get put to death, or even worse, what if it was somebody that just rejected the prophet but didn't adopt other religion?
Yeah. Right. If the guy had been an atheist, nobody in the United States would care hardly, except maybe the atheists. But
my understanding is that this guy basically got off on a technicality, saying that he was insane.
Oh, really? Okay.
Temporary insanity or something.
I hadn't been following it that close.
There was a bit of discussion
because they didn't want to actually take it to its final resolution.
Because a case like this defines your law. It defines the religious freedom and the scope of your law. And it's really a shame that this guy, basically they got rid of the whole thing as temporary insanity when they had an opportunity there to define, what religious freedom means to them.
Yeah, so we have an example of, I guess, a theocracy or a partial theocracy, or if there is a,
Sharia
or if
law,
you're a partial
right.
theocracy, maybe you're altogether a theocracy. But I just thought our response was sort of interesting because it was lip service to freedom of religion when it was really much more of a, hey, you're picking on a Christian.
Yeah.
Now that may, I can't prove that, but my idea is that if it had been another story in a parallel universe where the person had been an atheist, we wouldn't even know it happened. He'd be executed, and
Right, wouldn't even make the news, right?
Right,
It'd be hidden, right?
So I think
pretty sad.
A great belief in freedom of religion is possibly not all that it sometimes is cracked up to be there. Anyway,
I agree.
Definitely.
Thanks for your show.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling.
I want to add to that, in that,
Sure.
that, if Islam must be a really wonderful religion if they have to kill you if you decide to leave it,
Yeah. That's, these apostasy laws and they're similar to blasphemy laws and other things that I just, is your belief so fragile that, any opposition to it at all has got to be met with, death.
Mm-hmm. Right. It sort of says that they admit that they've got damaged goods there. And
I don't see many atheist suicide bombers, and I don't see atheists killing people because they believe in a God.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And not that that's a sound argument benefiting to the truth of anybody's position. It's just a commentary on what we see. It's sad.
Yep.
But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where if your beliefs are based in fear and you're not allowed to question your own beliefs at all, surely if somebody else is doing it publicly and vocally, now your children who you're trying to raise within your beliefs they're being subjected to the words of the devil or the preachings of the infidels, and they've got to be protected from that at all cost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it comes down to some people are certain. I think they fundamentally know on some level that there's no way to justify what they believe, and they're probably not even sure about it themselves. It's just one of those things that
you got to hold on.
You got to hang on to it, right or wrong. I got to keep this.
Mm-hmm.
But did you have more bits? Or?
No, well, I do, but you can go. But I wanted to first remind our callers, or folks, that we're a live call-in show today. You're welcome to call in Sunday the 26th of March, and the number will be back on your screen in a second. And we invite callers, come tell us why we're wrong, and ask us questions about atheism. You can tell us your own view on God versus mankind, which is our topic today. And in the meantime, go ahead.
Oh, I just... well, did you have more on the same topic?
Well, I don't have anything more prepared. I have two news stories. I have Americans, especially Catholics, approve of torture, which is an interesting little article. And I have atheists identified as America's most distrusted minority, according to the new University of Mexico study.
Yeah, nobody likes us.
Nobody likes us.
Nobody likes us. Nobody trusts us. And I think it's because in America, where you've got 80%, Christians, you've got this mentality which has been preached from the pulpit forever, and this picture of atheists. We talked about this a little bit yesterday on the nonprofits, and that is that right now, fundamentalist Christians they're defining what Christianity is. The liberal Christians who are reasonable, who may even agree with our position with regard to First Amendment rights, separation of church and state, etc. Those who aren't vocal, and in general, none of them are vocal enough, such that fundamentalist Christians are defining what Christianity means. They're defining what liberal Christians supposedly believe, even if they don't.
Yeah, their voices are sort of disproportionately loud.
Right. We are American family values. We are Christian, religion. And unless you have liberal Christians or other non-fundamentalist Christians speaking out and saying, no, sorry, you're overstepping your bounds by defining my Christianity, that just doesn't happen. And another problem is that for far too long, it's been fundamental Christians who have defined to the American public what atheism is, what atheists believe, and for people who aren't
ask an atheist instead.
Yeah, if you aren't willing to actually look into it, see, and get good information, if you're going to go do an internet search and learn about atheism, let's go to some atheist sites. If I wanted to learn what Buddhism was, I go to Buddhist sites to learn what they're talking about.
Sure.
I don't, Wikipedia may be a good start, but I'm not going to go to a fundamentalist Christian site to get a definition of Buddhism and what they believe. There's plenty of there are some neutral ones. There are,
Mm-hmm.
When I was preparing topics for this show and for the lecture and everything else, I try to get as much information as I can from as many sources as I can. If I'm putting together a fully fledged opinion of something or a perspective on something, and for people just to take the news from the pulpit that this atheists and agnostics and freethinkers, this entire secular society driven by Hollywood and the homosexual agenda is here to destroy American values, and they're of the devil, and they can't love, and all this other nonsense. It's just.
Well, I raised this point about Islam, being a bad religion because they have to kill you if you leave. Well, what does it say about Christianity if they have to lie, if they have to make up stuff, like, distort the definition of atheism or make up these myths? What does it say about Christianity if they have to lie to protect it? Right?
We can't let our kids find out that the next door neighbor who they like and who just seems to be a normal guy doesn't believe in God, because that'd just be devastating.
Yep, that'd be horrible.
We're just people like everybody else. we carry out normal lives, work, we have families, we love people, we love our kids and our parents and our siblings, and it's the vocal opposition. Those of us who might be classified as evangelical atheists aren't necessarily out to convert everybody to atheism. We're out to correct the perception of atheism. And if people happen to lose their religious beliefs and see reason, great. But that's not my goal, because in part I don't necessarily know that it's possible. On the part of me would say, yes, it is possible. I left my religious beliefs, and I, being a former fundamentalist Christian, obviously something happened to me that allowed me to make that transition. So I think it's possible. But I don't come on the show every week thinking that I'm converting the masses out there. It's just unrealistic. Most people are
I think from my perspective, I'm happy if we can get some people to think and question their assumptions and really decide whether they really have an answer for some of the questions we have for them.
Yeah, if you actually think about, for example, if we talk about the problem of evil, where an omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent God cannot logically exist in a universe that also contains evil. If you actually sit down and think about that for yourself, and you come up with some solution, anything that strengthens your belief, good for you. I mean, at least you thought about it. Most people haven't thought about this. I still think you're wrong. And I think with a little bit more conversation, I can show you why. But at least you took the chance to think about it.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about, in Christianity, how, Jesus is, the ultimate moral shining example and this wonderful, peaceful guy. And the reality is that, you have the Bible saying, of course, things like, did you think I came to bring peace? I came not to bring peace, but a sword. I came to, pit families against each other. But look at some of the advice that Jesus
leave your
gave.
family and follow me.
Right. Take a look at some of the advice that Jesus gave, and just think for yourself as to whether or not you consider this sound moral advice, really useful advice. If you do something wrong with your eye or your hand, cut it or pluck it off. Marrying a divorced woman is adultery. Don't plan for the future. Don't save money. Don't become wealthy. Sell everything and give it to the poor. Don't work to obtain food. Don't have sexual urges. Make people want to persecute you. Let everyone know that you're better than the rest. Take money from those who have no savings and give it to rich investors. If someone steals from you, don't try to get it back. If someone hits you, invite them to do it again. If you lose a lawsuit, give more than the judgment. If someone forces you to walk a mile, walk 2 miles. If anyone asks you for anything, give it to them without question. Now,
So some of that's nuts.
those are paraphrased, and people will say, "Oh, you're taking that all out of context." Well, that may be. There are some of those which may be in the context of a parable, and they didn't necessarily literally mean that. But the problem is that there's still the perception there that the foundation of these beliefs. Sure, turn the other cheek. Yes, you're not necessarily literally inviting somebody to hit you again. It's about forgiveness. But there are, there are bits of advice in there which are not very wise. Wouldn't suit us today at all. And yet these are the, how is this any more? There's nothing profound there. There's nothing that you don't see these words as the ultimate truth.
Resonant, right?
Yeah, this is the ultimate truth. Turn the other cheek. It just doesn't fly. But what was the name we got? Tamara? All right, let's get it. Is it Tamara?
Tamara's right.
Hey, welcome.
Hey, welcome. I've called before.
Yeah.
Some of the things that you guys are talking about, why Christians are why this group of Christians is so adamant about trying to force. It's one thing, if they chose to live their lives by what they believe, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But enforcing everyone else to believe what they believe, they go out of their way, they do lie, they kill even to force their beliefs on
others,
the rest
right.
of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've wondered about this for some time, and I'm thinking that there are groups out there that are seeing almost an erosion of their faith. I'm in quotations, because so many things that they believe, and including the list that you just gave us, are not valued, and we see it as just wrong in our secular society today. So many things that are in the Bible: slavery, beating and punishing and stoning, and the way that a lot of religions view women. They see that those parts of their religion are
disappearing, right?
Disappearing, and so if what their beliefs are, if those beliefs that they in their Bible are, as far as they're concerned, the Word of God, if they're not true, then how much else is not true in their belief? And I'm wondering if perhaps that they're trying to build, take over this. I don't think they're trying to take over the nation, but they're trying to erode the secular hold on the population and push their agenda, because I think they're, to be honest, afraid that their view of the world is disappearing.
Well, I think fear is definitely a big motivation. I think for a lot of these folks, they feel that, well, if we're not doing things for God, then He's gonna punish us, and you see that in a lot of the religious right. Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell claim that the disaster with the airplanes going into the Twin Towers was because we have turned away from God, and you hear that all the time, and I think they're just sort of afraid that hey, if this is really better, and the society goes this way, how can will I end up going to heaven? Will God punish me for allowing this to happen when I could have done something? I guess that's the thinking. But I think a lot of it's fear-based. Go ahead.
Definitely. No, the list of things that I read off that you referenced a little while ago, I just want to make mention that actually was put together by Dan Barker, who also did the music that we used to start off the show today. Dan is a former minister and music composer who stunned everybody, his family and his co-workers and everybody, because he was working actively in the Christian ministry when he abandoned his Christian beliefs and acknowledged his atheism, and he was one of the many people who was important reading his work in my own transition as well. But this concept of faith that we just keep running into, and you had mentioned that you'd be okay if they just keep their religious faith to themselves, but the problem is that they either want to make sure that everybody believes what they believe, and they don't necessarily try to enforce that as much as that's where their proselytization comes in. Or the other option is to make people act according to their beliefs as much as possible. You know, if their beliefs are that abortion should be illegal, then that's all they need to know. It doesn't matter, and I'm not making commentary on an abortion position, but
it's completely at odds with this notion that God gave you free will and you better exercise it, you know, for your own.
Right. But for them, the whole thing comes down to one question, and that is they're convinced that this is against God, and there is no other discussion, there is no other reason, and therefore, because it's against God, we're going to make sure that nobody, whether they believe in our God or not, can actually do this.
Right.
That type of imposition of their religious opinions upon the rights of other people, yeah, I'm completely agree with you. That's what I actively oppose every day.
Yeah, and my other issue, because I have a lot of friends who are gay, and that's a huge issue right now. I mean, as some of the people who I know, I have friends who are Christians, I have friends who aren't Christians, but, you know, even my friends, even knowing that I have gay friends, as far as they're concerned, if their beliefs were the law of the land, homosexuals would be sent off to re-education camps, and, you know, that's just wrong, and I think that's one of those issues. I mean, in their Bible, you know, homosexuals abomination, and, you know, abortion, even though I don't really think there is that much in the Bible about abortion per se, but
no, that's a very interesting topic, by the way.
But, you know, even feminism, I mean, women wouldn't really be allowed to work. I know several people.
Well, you know, you could make the claim that religions very much ride on the backs of women, you know,
right.
And use them as workhorses.
Use them as workhorses, and it's just amazing to me. Some of them, and I don't have a problem with faith per se, because I think faith is a little, maybe I'm not quite sure how to say it, because I have faith in things that I have no proof of, like I believe life exists on other planets. Do I have proof that life exists on other planets? No, but the evidence that life exists on this planet and all different kinds of places where human beings themselves can't live, but there's a niche there and life sort of takes over. So I have faith that there's life beyond this planet, but, you know, I have no proof for it. So I don't have a problem with people's faiths, but it's the problem with the beliefs that people have and trying to make everyone else, regardless of whether or not they have a faith in that belief, and making them forced
Right.
to believe in it. That's all I had to say.
Yeah, we agree with you. Very much so.
Well, as you've called us a couple times, and as we've been a little while since we mentioned it, I'd like to remind everybody and invite you as well that dinner after the show, we're going to Threadgill's on Riverside. Any atheist-friendly people are welcome to join us. Come down and meet the cast and the crew, because there's a lot of people behind the scenes that you don't get to see. We're here every week doing hard work, even on weeks that I missed.
Yep.
And
the real troopers.
And you'll get a chance to talk to them, some other ACA members, some friends, some other people, just other viewers of the show who come down. We normally have a pretty decent little crowd lately. And
yeah, we've had in the 20s of people.
Yeah.
So come on down and join us.
Okay.
Thanks
bye.
for calling.
Bye-bye.
And we'll go on now to Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, I've called a few times before. I called last week, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
About callers running on too long, right?
What's that? Yeah,
And you ran on a long time.
Not too long.
All right, let me put you on hold.
Hey,
I'm kidding, Chris.
Something you guys had said earlier, and a couple statistics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
One thing you guys said was 80% of America's Christian. Is that did I understand that right?
Roughly. 70.
I don't think that's right. I think that statistic's probably not correct.
78% profess in the last religious poll Christianity as their religion.
Well, I heard about a poll just last week that said almost 40% of Americans are either atheist or agnostic.
It's
So
not
I
that
could
high.
understand maybe 78% of
no.
religious people in this country might be.
There's
Your
a
numbers
category-
are way off if you think 40% of the
No,
United
they
States
could
citizens.
almost were either agnostic or atheist. I'm not saying atheist because a lot of people just don't know or they have their own idea.
Yeah, there's
they
this
don't
category
actually say,
called
"I'm a Christian,"
nuns,
or-
which is sort of none of the above,
Yeah,
none of the above
non-religious.
non-religious,
That's
and that
about
includes
15.
atheists and agnostics and a lot of folks that don't even go to church, and that category is about what, 15%?
15 to 17%. You can go to
Well, but the whole thing with polls, like for instance, you guys also I can't remember what the statistic was, but you said something else about that this is what Christians, a certain percentage of Christians or whatever believe, but it's what a certain percent of Christians polled believe.
sure.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
but
you have
that
to be
doesn't
aware of that.
necessarily mean it's a perfect, like you can say that the entire Christian population,
Well, when you're
that
talking
it's
about-
definitely 15% or whatever the percent was.
Right.
But,
The results of any poll are always going to be speculative, but
Yeah.
when you're talking about something as big as this, a lot of this is covered from census data and really reliable polling groups.
But the census isn't that reliable because I know most of the people I know don't even fill that stuff out.
Well,
So,
to say that when you have multiple polls showing around 15 to 17% on average are non-religious, and then to cite one that shows 40% are atheist or agnostic, that's a statistically huge jump.
I'm saying that they're not Christian. That they're almost 40%. Whether I've got friends that aren't Christian, they might have been born Jewish, but they don't practice it. Or they're not Muslim, any of that, but still believe in their own idea of a God.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so that's why I find it hard to believe that almost 80% of our country
it also
are
matters
really
a lot,
Christian.
Chris. It also matters a lot how the questions are asked. You can skew the statistics one way or the other just by how you ask the question.
Right.
Like if you're asking about whether people believe in gods versus whether they are professing Christians, those are
Right.
two very different notions.
Right. Well, I think that's what a lot of polls that they kind of misrepresent what people like what they truly believe.
It is
But
good to ask to look into the poll and see what questions they're really asking because.
Right.
And it's also problematic too with some of these longitudinal studies where they go back and they compare religious belief from like the 40s to now because we don't have the luxury of going back and asking the questions we'd really like to know to those people back in the 40s, right?
Right.
So you have to read in a fair amount
On this particular issue, with regard to the best statistics available, or what are generally considered the best statistics available, you can both go to adherence.org, and also you were quoting that Journal of Religious Sciences thing.
Mm-hmm.
There are links from there as to where the numbers come from. Any poll that's showing that 40% of Americans are atheist or agnostic, I would definitely
missaid it. What I meant was 40% of Americans, almost 40% of Americans, do not believe in any organized religion. That's more like atheist, agnostic, or has their own idea.
I think that's including
what I'm trying
other
to say.
categories of folks.
that's still significantly higher than what most of the polls are showing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's
then
not
they
belabor
just lied,
that.
I guess, on this show that I
we can
thought
maybe
of.
all go check our facts and double check that for next time.
Well, it was actually on the Bill Maher show Friday night. But at
Okay.
any rate,
Bill Maher's show Friday night wasn't talking about total population religion. Bill Maher's show was talking about how many approve of torture. That 40% of people who are secular say torture is always wrong. And out of Protestants, it's only 37%. And out of Catholics, it's 34%.
okay.
That's where that number comes from.
I happen to have that in front of me.
Also, you guys, maybe I tuned in late because I really didn't hear. But the one guy if you're looking at the TV screen towards the left, I don't know what his name is.
I'm Don.
Don.
Okay. Well, said something about about leaving the Muslim religion. You have to be killed or whatever. I mean, I don't really know what you guys were talking about there. Like.
Well, there was an
When I
article.
heard that, I was like, that's just not true. That's certain, I mean, there are sects of Islam that I'm sure fundamentalist Islam, but overall, that's not like a fact. about.
Well, that's
Islam.
not true in the United States, certainly, but absolutely
Well,
in
that's
a lot of
not true in a
Muslim
lot of
countries.
places.
Well, this
I
is
think
actually in
once
response
again
to a
that-
news story about a man who was actually put up for trial for leaving the religion, and he converted to Christianity and was up to be killed in
Well,
Afghanistan.
where was that?
Afghanistan, apostasy is against the law.
In that province of Afghanistan, yeah, because the
Yeah.
religious people run the show there. But that doesn't, I mean, it's the same thing in Beirut. That was a beautiful city. Half of it was Christian, half Muslim, and a lot of those people went. I mean, even Yasser Arafat's wife was a Christian. I mean, I think that it's overstated a little bit. When
We
you
were
say,
only talking about one story, though.
And also, well, okay, well, that's what I'm saying. I guess I missed that, but what I heard was if you want to leave Islam, you have to,
Well,
they wanna
that's
kill
certainly
you.
a theme in
And
Islam,
that
and
makes
that's in
Islam
the
a
Quran.
bad religion.
It's in
That's
the
all I
Quran.
heard you guys say.
So,
I'm just
so
saying
whether it's
that's
practiced or
from
not is
that.
another matter, but that's very much part of the mindset.
Yeah.
Is
Whether or not you can find it practiced everywhere is a little bit different from
Okay,
whether or not
so-
it's a fundamental aspect of the religion.
Well, it is a fundamental. That's like saying Osama bin Laden represents, 80% of Muslims. He doesn't. He represents a
Pat
very
Robertson
small
claims
part
he
of.
represents 80% of Christians.
No, you're right about that because you guys actually did say earlier that Jerry Falwell said that, and I remember because he said about stuff about gays and stuff too, that's the reason why the World Trade Centers were attacked. Well, isn't that what Osama bin Laden said why he attacked the World Trade Center? I mean, aren't they really saying the same thing? I find that really interesting.
Oh yeah, there's a lot
there's a
of
little bit of that,
close
for sure.
parallels between the so-called Christian imams and the Islam ones.
Yeah. Well, I think all of these people got to remember one thing, that it all came from the same place, really. You know what I mean? I mean, Christians were Jews that revolted, and Muslims were
They're all Abrahamic
Christians,
religions.
I
right.
mean, it's all true. I mean, actually, I think I read years ago, it was a college textbook, on religion, and it actually said the word Muslim actually came. It wasn't necessarily an Islamic term. It meant someone who was very devout, whether it was Christian, Jewish, or whatever. And because they felt they were more devout than Christians and Jews, they were Muslim. And that's how that term came to represent them. But, I mean, at any rate, I don't know, because I came in late on your show today, and I had only
Shame
heard
on
that
you.
one thing, and I heard
That's
a couple
right.
things, and I was like,
You're going to be
man,
flogged.
we're in sad shape if all that's really
It's
true.
part of the new atheist tenets. If you come into the show late, we're going to beat you with a wet noodle after the show. From the
Hey.
flying spaghetti monster.
Right.
But hey, thanks a lot for calling and tuning in even for part of it. That's good enough for me.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, it's. I think there may be a little bit more to the story, and the foundations of how religions begin and how they proceed, a lot more complex than that. But sometimes it is kind of simple. When I was talking about in the lecture, the canonization, a lot of times things come down to just one person.
Making
If
an
that person
arbitrary
is
decision,
in
right?
the right position at the right time with the right number of followers, positioned properly, you can just make an edict, and it sticks, because anybody who refutes you has to have some good reason to do so.
Well, it's good to pay attention to the fact that winners write the history, right? And there's I don't remember the deal exactly, but somebody was saying at the lecture that the Nicene Creed is you can view it as a catalog of this holy war made
Right.
this, the winners here made this decision. The
There's a
next
list of
holy
things that
war.
people have been martyred for and killed for.
Uh-huh.
Specific beliefs. Yeah, Paul brought that point up.
Yeah.
Hi, Paul.
Is he out there?
Paul's always out there.
Okay. Oh, getting back to statistics, statistics and surveys, one thing to pay attention to is what the sample is that they're drawing from.
Right.
There was a great Scalia quote that I think you wrote about at one point, where he was talking about, well, of all the people who believe in gods, they're all Christians in the United States, and he sort of threw out all us atheists and said that we were sort of irrelevant to the whole thing. So he of course got a larger number because he was manipulating the denominator, and it's like, yeah, watch out for that too.
Well, it's like somebody, there's the quote that, out of all the people who oppose abortion, they all weren't aborted. Well, duh.
That's a good one.
Let me put the numbers together to work out however I want. Peter, you there?
Yeah, that was pretty funny. Listen, I'm really interested in learning your position. I just tuned into your show, and I'm interested in the atheist position. I understand, an atheist is someone who doesn't believe in God, but then, you get into the notion of what is a God, and
yep.
So let's just start with this. How about, you've heard of the unified field in science, correct?
Sure.
Okay, now do you believe in the unified field?
I'm not positive.
Okay, so basically, can't you really say that when you say you don't believe in God, isn't it just like a notion of God? And then
it depends. Whether or not we would say that we believe in a God, or whether or not we would actively say that a God doesn't exist, depends completely on how you define God.
Exactly. Okay, so how do you define God that you say that you don't believe it? I guess
I don't.
That's one of our difficulties here. Is every single caller has a different notion.
Right.
Exactly.
And what my basic position?
Because I can say I don't believe in this. If God is some guy up in the sky who thinks,
right?
The George Carlin atheist view is childish to me. That's just like you're in second grade. If you believe that when you're in 55. You have a second-grade notion of God when you're 50.
People have believed that over the years.
You should be an atheist.
People actually do believe that.
Really is, if you believe that there's an underlying intelligence, if you have a basic understanding, something like that, and then you define that as God, I don't think anyone could deny.
Well, some people define God as the same as the universe, in which case, why bother changing the name?
Why? Excuse me? I don't understand.
Oh, I said that some people define God as a universe, and why bother changing the name of the universe to God?
Okay, so what do you mean, why changing the name? I think, because here's what I'm saying is that different people are going to have different notions of God, and as you expand your awareness, you're going to have your notion of God is going to change. Certainly that's occurred in my own life, I know that.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking
but we don't see any notion of two people converging on the same notion.
That doesn't make sense either. You can certainly, the God that I believed in the second grade, that God no longer exists. But certainly, if I define God, the way that I'm trying to,
hit us with your definition.
What is your definition? Hang on, I had to put you on hold because there's a problem with the mics where you can't hear us when we're trying to ask something. What is your definition of God? What God do you believe in?
I believe that there's an underlying intelligence. And that if you look at God that way, you can equate God to like the unified field, say. If you look at all the
okay, so you have more of a view that
the unified field,
right? You have a view that is very deistic.
God. Okay, but I'd like to hear your position because y'all and particularly one of the things that really generated all this discussion is there was a physics professor at UT. You familiar with him? That won the Nobel Prize.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I really want to get his position, but he couldn't talk. But since y'all are atheists, I figured I'd at least talk to y'all and get y'all's position on exactly, where you're coming from.
It's really pretty simple.
Is my question.
It's really
as an atheist, is there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be rude. We just can't talk. There's a problem with the mics. It's really very simple, at least for me, my position. I don't actively define a God. Any definition that I've used when actually investigating somebody's claims of God or my position on it, I tend to use their definition. And by saying that I don't have a belief in a God, I'm basically saying that for every God which has been presented to me, there's insufficient evidence to support belief. There's no good reason for me to assume that any of them exist, including a unified underlying intelligence. Because apart from just looking around and saying, wow, this must have been designed, or wow, this is obviously the result of intelligence, you can look around and say, no, this could have happened naturally through natural processes. And you actually, as the person claiming that a particular deity exists or a particular concept about God is real, you're required to supply evidence to support that. And I have yet to find anybody or any claim with sufficient evidence to demonstrate it.
Mm-hmm. That's fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. I agree with you there. But here's my question: is if you understand what I'm saying, right?
I think so.
Okay. So there's a language there. In order to make that language correct, there has to be some sort of underlying intelligence that makes us be able to communicate. That's just inherent within our discussion.
But
2 + 2 = 4. That's true here. It's true on the other side of the planet. It's true. There is an intelligence there.
And 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4 because of an intelligence.
Well, then what would you call it? I don't know what you call it.
It's a mathematical model that we've created.
It's just mathematic. It's just a mathematical expression of reality.
Right, but there's an intelligence to it.
Sorry?
Because it's true. It's true here. It's true on the other side of the planet. It's true yesterday. It's going to be true tomorrow, as far as we know.
Sure, and the sun.
Okay, but
we're 93 million miles from the sun.
2 plus 2. Just go back to the communications. We're talking. We're understanding each other.
Yes.
In order to make that true, there has to be an underlying intelligence that makes that
Yes, that's my brain and your brain.
Right, but what I'm saying is, between the two of that, underneath that, there's an underlying intelligence.
Underneath both of our brains, there's some other intelligence?
Underlying all of creation, I would say
Prove
there's an intelligence.
Because I can find no reason to believe that is true.
Well, that's an interesting position that you can't... Basically, what you're saying is that there is no prediction then. There's no prediction. The sun does not rise in the morning or the
no, we have matter and energy and all that, and it's all inanimate.
I mean, I don't understand your position. If you can't see that the 2 plus 2 doesn't equals 4,
2 plus 2 does equal 4.
True tomorrow. Would you say that?
2 plus 2 is going to equal... Can I answer? I hate to keep putting you on hold. I hate to keep putting you on hold, but I'm going to.
Okay, go ahead.
If you ask me a question, let me answer.
Well, I keep going back to the same thing. You're saying that there's no underlying intelligence, but clearly there's underlying intelligence.
Well, you see an underlying intelligence. I don't see an underlying intelligence that goes beyond our two brains.
2 plus 2.
Let me answer. You see an underlying intelligence. I don't see that. In order for me to see that, you're going to need to demonstrate that there is required necessarily an underlying intelligence. That 2 plus 2 only equals 4 because some transcendent intelligence defines 2 plus 2 to equal 4. And you cannot demonstrate that. The fact that we don't both see it is another issue.
That's an interesting position. I just don't see how you can not say that there's an underlying intelligence. I mean,
it's really simple. I used my own intelligence.
We don't find that argument convincing.
I used my own intelligence to say that there wasn't an underlying one, because until the default position is disbelief until there's sufficient evidence to warrant belief. You make an exceptional claim that, there's an invisible dragon in my backyard, or there's an underlying intelligence. You're just talking about natural laws. 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's just a natural mathematical expression of how we understand reality. We defined what 2 is. We defined the plus sign. We defined equals. And we're just expressing, using our own communication, a definition of our reality. There's nothing in there that implies that there has to be an underlying intelligence. But let's go on to Richard. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I just want to ask a quick question.
Sure.
I talk to a lot of religious people all the time, and they always profess their belief, and I always ask them, well, if you have this firm belief, why do you commit every type of crime and sin in front of this almighty, omnipotent God that you? It's like, then they always use the weak excuse, or I'm only human.
Yeah, the spirit is willing and the flesh is weak.
Yeah, I just like one of them to call and defend that position, because you can't keep saying you're weak, because the more sins you commit, that's just a weak, worn-out excuse now. But, we're at war now because some stupid, devil-possessed president lied to us, and now he got everybody killing each other.
Right.
And all the Christians are involved.
He should step up and take his lumps,
Yeah, it's like, they need to start thinking for themselves, and living a Christian life and doing what Christ would do. Just don't.
Or my favorite, the devil made me do it.
Yeah, there's commonly this perception that you're a Christian, you're better. You don't claim that you're actually better, but you should be better because you're supposed to be shining the light of Jesus and living a good life. And yet what we find consistently is that immoral behavior, or behavior that we as a society would consider immoral, is just as prevalent, if not more prevalent, in some cases, some specific instances, among believers than it is among other religions or non-believers.
That's right. Well, I think they should lead by example, and Christ set the example, and I just like to see more of that.
I especially think they should lead by the example of praying in quiet and not, in the closet.
Right.
Hey,
well, that's all I had to say, because I get tired of the hypocrisy. It's killing everybody.
Thanks a lot, Richard.
We agree. Thank you.
And we have one of the ACA members, Joe Zemecki.
Howdy.
Hey, Joe.
Hi. Well, I have a couple of comments real quick. First of all, you talked to that one Christian who was saying that there's obviously intelligent design in the universe.
I don't think he was necessarily a Christian.
Oh.
He could have been. I don't want to make a claim about what his beliefs were, because a lot of the type of arguments that go along that line are for the concept of a deistic God, or maybe even a pantheistic God, some kind of the universe is God, or God is transcendent in love and underlying everything, and we're just blind if we can't see it, and I can't accept that.
Or as we also call them, Christians light.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah. The what was it you used? The term you used?
I don't remember.
I can't remember. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
Well, anyway, you kept asking him for some evidence that there is intelligent design in the universe, and he kept implying that the evidence is overwhelming and right in our faces.
Yeah.
And then he never talked about it.
Well, I actually disconnected the call.
That's okay.
It's one of the things that I've decided to do when we're going around in circles with the same issue over and over and over again, and we're not going to make any headway. If you're going to ask me a question, give me the chance to answer it. If you're going to make a claim and I ask for some evidence to support the claim, and all you want to do is keep going back to saying that it's obvious that there's an intelligence underlying it, we're not going to get anywhere. So there's no point in wasting time on the call.
Well, exactly. And if he had brought that, or even had that to bring, the evidence, it probably would have come out in a few seconds with all politeness. Anyway, there's one more point I wanted to make. We have a print newsletter.
Okay.
Yeah. That maybe you all had a copy. You could pull it up and show the audience.
I don't, but I wasn't around this morning.
Yeah, I was trying to be good. And
I have. Yes, I do have one.
You do have one. Well, you can dig it out. So, so Joe Zemecki publishes our newsletter every month, and we have it on our website for reading. Bright. And for those folks that want to join the ACA and are not sort of web enabled, we can send these out as part of our membership.
Yes, and I wanted to mention my co-editor, Marla Repka, helps me out a great deal with that as well, and Don Rhodes has also been very helpful. And I thank everybody. And we're looking for submissions, letters to the editor, articles, testimonials.
There's good stuff. We even got Tracy does your cartoon for the newsletter.
Yep.
And
Tracy Harris.
Yep. We're about out of time, Joe. I got to let you go. We got like 30 seconds left.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Have a great day.
Okay, as a reminder, everybody's welcome to and invited to join us at Threadgills on Riverside. We'll be there in about 30-45 minutes. Any atheist-friendly people, we'd love to see you. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thank you to our cast and crew and our callers. We appreciate your calls.